The Adventures of Brian by Eric Thompson. Read by Richard Wilson. Brian, Dougal's friend. Florence was at the roundabout, waiting for something to happen, and Zebedee was late again. "Sorry to be late." "That's all right." There's a visitor in the garden," said Zebedee. "Oh, good," said Florence. "I wonder who the visitor is," thought Florence as she wandered through the wood. And Dougal found out. It was a snail. Dougal and the snail sized each other up. "Hello," said the snail. "Oh, hello," said Dougal. "Have we met?" "Don't think so." "What's your name?" "Brian." "Brian? Snails aren't called Brian. Snails are mollusks." "Aren't you funny?" said the snail. "I like you." And he climbed on top of Dougal. "Shall we go then?" Florence was amazed. Dougal, you appear to have a snail on your head." "His name's Brian." "Hello, Brian." "Hello." "Don't encourage him," said Dougal. "He's nice and soft," said the snail. "I like him." "Oh, good," said Florence. And the snail talked to Florence. Dougal tried to pretend that the snail wasn't there. "Looks like rain." "It never rains here," said Florence. "Shh! Looks like rain." "Rain? I hate rain," said the snail. "It's so noisy. I'll be off then." And he was gone. "That's a relief," said Dougal. "I thought I was stuck with him." "I like your friend. I can live without him." "Had a good day?" said Zebedee. "Yes, thank you," said Florence. "Did you meet Brian? He's a mollusk, you know." "I thought he was a snail," said Florence. "Good night," said Zebedee. The Imposter. Florence was at the roundabout watching Zebedee bong about, as he was wont to do. She told him when he stopped still for a moment that she had been invited for tea with Dougal and Brian. "What fun," said Zebedee. Florence set out for tea, but of course she had no idea what she was letting herself in for. "We've only got 1 cup, Dougal, old mate," said Brian. "Only 1 cup? How can we have tea with only 1 cup?" "We could take turns or use straws." "I don't think that would be very refined." "What do you suggest then, Dougal, with your mighty and powerful brain?" "Oh, I've gone off the whole idea. 1 cup isn't enough for 3, and I'm rather particular with whom I share." "Florence wouldn't mind." "I wasn't actually thinking of Florence." "What shall we do then?" "I shall leave you to entertain Florence and get on with things I have to do." So Dougal left Brian to explain to Florence about the tea party and went on his busy way. "I've come to tea," said Florence brightly. "Where's Dougal?" You mean where's the tea?" And Brian tried to explain about there being no cups and Dougal going off and all that. "I don't know what he's doing." Actually, Dougal was standing before a mirror with a pair of glasses. Only 1 cup. So humiliating. Dougal tried on the glasses. "Oh. Hello, Dougal," said Florence acidly. "Dougal? Dougal? I'm not Dougal. My name's, Reg. Who's this Dougal?" And he was so embarrassed about his tea party that he couldn't even look at Florence. "Dougal? Who's Dougal?" "Oh, I am sorry," said Florence. "I thought you were a friend of mine called Dougal. He invited me to tea, you know, and I was just looking for him. I wanted to give him some sugar. Dougal just loves sugar." And Dougal did not know what to do. He wanted the sugar very much. Finally he said very quietly, I'm Dougal. Oh, no, you're not Dougal. Dougal is much prettier than you. I am. So they went to ask Brian. Is this Dougal? Said Florence. Oh, no, Dougal's much shaggier than that. I am Dougal. And I'm very pretty and very shaggy, and I like sugar. So Brian looked at Dougal for a long time. Dougal doesn't wear glasses. Dougal has pretty brown speckled eyes. So have I. I think you're an impostor, said Brian, and he left, laughing. I'm not an impostor. I'm a dog. Have a good tea, said Zebedee suddenly. Yes, thank you, said Florence. Time for bed, then, said Zebedee. New Horizons. Dougal was thinking, I must get away from it all. All of what? Said Brian. All of you. I want to explore new sights, new experiences, new horizons. New friends. Now we're going to be all hurt, I suppose. I'm not hurt. Don't care. Don't care was made to care. Well, send us a postcard, said Brian, crying. See if we care. Oh, dear. I wonder if Columbus had this trouble. Ah, well. Brian was very unhappy. Who am I going to fight with? And he rushed through the garden, telling everyone Dougal was leaving. Meanwhile, Florence was meeting Zebedee. Dougal's leaving, said Zebedee. Dougal's what? Said Florence. Halt, said Ermyntrude. I beg your pardon, said Dougal. What's all this? What do you think you've come as? Customs. Dougal showed his garden passport. No good. What do you mean, no good? Out of date. I'll have to get it stamped, I suppose. Really. Dougal then encountered another snag as Brian drove up in a car. What's all this, then? Dougal demanded. Customs, said Brian. May I see your passport, please? I'm just going to get it. I shall have to inspect your luggage, sir. Brian drew a deep breath. Ooh, can't have this. Can't take sugar out of the country. Oh, this means trouble. What are you going on about, great oaf? Hey, put that back. I shall have to conjugate this, sir. Dougal felt thwarted, but try as he might, he couldn't get past the customs gate. Just then, Florence arrived. Thank goodness, have you any idea what's going on here? They've all gone crackers. Really? Said Florence. She called to Zebedee and asked him if he could persuade Dougal to stay. I might, said Zebedee. And suddenly there was a pile of sugar. Oh dear, no place like home, is there? Take me years to get through this lot. Dougal, you are dreadful, said Florence. I know, said Dougal, but look where it gets me. Brian's voice. Florence called to Zebedee, who arrived. Hello, said Florence, spinning. Hello, said Zebedee, laughing. I feel energetic. Do you? So, what shall I do? Go to the garden, perhaps. Yes, said Florence. I thought you might, said Zebedee. Dougal was waiting. What shall we do? Said Florence. Do? Well, do you want to sort some sugar? No, thank you. It doesn't appeal. Well, what do you want to do? I don't know. Do you want to chase a few snails? Can be fun. No, thank you. Music? No. Perhaps you'd like me to stand on my head and sing Annie Laurie. No, I don't think so. Well, I wouldn't have anyway. Any other ideas? Said Florence. No, I haven't. Yes, I have. We could pick some pretty witty flowers, said Dougal. What a good idea! How clever of you to think of it! And she left, picking flowers as she went. Why don't I keep my mouth shut? Look at me. Constance Spry rides again. Did you know you got a mouthful of flowers? Said Brian, laughing. I suppose you think that's... Dougal took the flowers out of his mouth. Funny. Well, it's not something you see every day, is it? A dog with a mouthful of daisies. What are you doing, Brian? Said Florence. I'm going about my lawful business, spreading joy and delight. Old Harry seems a bit upset. What's the matter with him? No one written to him lately? Really, Brian? Dougal was maintaining his dignity. I trust you've stopped hobnobbing with snails, he said, leaving. Meanwhile, in another part of the garden, 2 willow trees were doing a bit of weeping. Oh, woe! Oh, woe! Oh, woe! They said together. Brian couldn't stand it and retreated into his shell. Come out, said Florence. Whoa, said the trees. Florence was worried, and so was Dougal, and so was Brian. It's very sad. Well, they shouldn't be weeping willows if they can't stand the strain, said Dougal. And this made the trees stop crying. Down with dogs. What was that? Said Florence. They're saying, down with dogs, said Brian innocently. Down with dogs. Whoa! Whoa! You really must try to cheer up, said Florence. It's all very well for you. I don't know what timber's coming to, said Brian, as the trees wept buckets. Keep away from us. We want to be alone. Oh, woe! Oh, woe! I wouldn't touch them with a barge bow, said Dougal. Better leave them, said Florence. Well, said Brian, it takes all sorts to make a world, as my old dad says whenever he gets the chance, which is too often for my liking. The trees wept on. It's been a funny sort of day, said Dougal. Dougal's experiment. Mr. Rusty was looking at the moon through his telescope. Looks quite close. What are you looking at? Said Florence. The moon. I wouldn't mind going there to have a look round. No, indeed, I wouldn't mind going there. I don't wish to stifle the spirit of free enterprise, said Zebedee, but it has been done. Oh, you, said Florence. In the garden, Florence couldn't find Dougal anywhere, so she asked Brian. Well, far be it from me to tell tales about my old chum, but he does appear to have lost his cool rather. Whatever do you mean? He's flipped. Flipped? Don't you understand English? I thought I was making myself abundantly clear. Our shaggy friend has gone dotty. Oh, is that all? I thought it was something serious. Brian laughed. He's over here. Of course, I'm only joking, really. I know. Dougal did appear to be up to something unusual, to say the least. Now, let me see. The square on the hypotenuse equals the volume of Archimedes minus the square root of Pythagoras, which gives us a grand total of 7.5, except on Thursdays, which have 31. Yes? What are you doing, Dougal? Said Florence. Isn't it obvious? No, said Brian. Nothing's obvious to you, great oaf. I don't suppose you could even spell geometry, which is what I'm concerning myself with at the moment. I am conducting an experiment in dimensions. Of the moon, said Florence. Moon? Who cares about the moon? This is to do with the exact sizing of a lump of sugar. How did the moon get into this? Very important work, said Brian. Yes, it is. So I'll trouble you. Oh, swallowed me chalk. Florence had a look round. "I'm very impressed," said Brian. Let me get on. I'm sure Isaac Newton didn't have snails bothering him." "Who's Isaac Newton?" said Brian. "Did he invent sugar?" But Dougal was too busy experimenting to reply, and he started muttering and writing scientifically. "What's all this, then?" said Brian. "I can see all my results ruined with you two." 3'10", said Florence. "Thank you. Now, 3'10" by 3'10". Didn't know I got sugar that size. No, I'm 3'10". "Back to the drawing board, old thing," said Brian, laughing. "And don't add the date." "In spite of interruptions, I have reached an answer, and that's it. 3 is the answer. Eureka!" "Eureka," said Florence. "Eureka," said Brian. "A cube is a cube is a cube," said Dougal. The Black Flower. Mr. Rusty was reading a book when Florence arrived. "Hello," she said loudly. "I can hear you. I'm only reading. I'm not asleep. Sorry." "Very interesting book, all about a black primrose. Ever seen one?" "Never." "Neither have I. But it must exist. It says so in the book." "Then it must." "Stands to reason. There must be a black primrose somewhere." "Well, I'm not sure your reasoning is absolutely sound." Zebedee arrived. "Problems?" "It's just that Mr. Rusty wants a black primrose." Not if it's any bother," said Mr. Rusty. "Oh, it won't be any bother," said Florence. Dougal was singing to himself, but when he saw Florence he coughed with embarrassment. Sorry." "That was lovely, Dougal." "Woke me up," said Brian. "Now, I have a problem, and I need your help," said Florence. "Naturally," said Dougal. "Mr. Rusty wants a black primrose, and he's asked me to find one." "I knew it. I knew it." "He knew it. He knew it. Shaggy Sherlock," said Brian. "Ignore him." "Now, what about it?" "What? Oh, this black primrose thing. Yes, well, can you help? Answer me that." "I'd rather not," said Florence. "Isn't it past your bedtime?" said Dougal to Brian. "Harry," said Brian. "What? What did you say? What?" "Nothing." "I've been too lenient with that snail of late. He's getting ideas above his station. I may strike." Florence tried to keep Dougal's mind on the subject of black primroses. "I hope you're looking, Dougal." "My eyes are glued to the barren ground." "Oh, you," said Florence. Then she had a sudden thought. "I've had a sudden thought. Perhaps they grow on trees, in which case we'll need a ladder." Fortunately, there was a ladder to hand, and Dougal lifted it up on his head. "Better humour her, I suppose. Enjoying it, are you?" "I am," said Florence. They came to a likely tree. "This is ridiculous," said Dougal. But it wasn't, because there was the flower. Dougal had some sugar for strength. "You don't, of course, expect me to go up there." "Well, yes, I do." So Dougal went up. "I shall want danger money, you know. This is madness, madness." And meanwhile, Brian had found a black flower of his own. "What? What? What? What?" "Yes, what?" said Florence. "I thought you wanted a black primrose, so I made you one, out of lettuce," said Brian. "Oof. Well, if that's the way you feel, I'll eat it." "My nerves are a jangle, a jangle. I may never recover." "Careful," said Florence, holding the ladder. "Now she tells me." Dougal dropped the flower. Florence picked it up, and they took it to show Mr. McHenry. "Look what we've got," said Florence. I'll put it with the others." "Others?" "Yes," said Mr. McHenry. "Flowers get lonely up trees, like people." Dougal's jam. Dougal had been making some jam, an old recipe of me Auntie Meggsy. The jam moved. It was a rather powerful recipe. "Now don't get carried away, you lot." The jams were disgusted and quite beside themselves with concern. "He's forgotten the sugar." "Hope I haven't forgotten anything," said Dougal. "The sugar!" they shouted, but being jam, they couldn't shout very loud. "Quiet, please, noisy lot, aren't you? I wonder if I should bake some bread. I suppose people will ask me for some, being famed as I am for me jam-making." People were arriving. "Hello, Dougal," said Florence. "I suppose you've heard?" "No, what?" "That I've made some of my famous jam, sought after by royalty and known to drive jam gourmets mad. I'm a jam gourmet, show me." "Here it is." But it wasn't. What? "Has it gone?" said Florence. "That is the unnecessary remark of this century. Of course it's gone." Dougal sniffed suspiciously. "I smell a snail. There's a snaily smell." "He wouldn't," said Florence. "You have a touching faith in mollusk nature. Of course he would. Come." So Florence went. "If I catch him, he'll smart for this." They encountered Ermyntrude, busy eating flowers. "Hello, dear things." "Have you seen a snail carrying a lot of jam?" said Dougal. "I haven't, but then I might not have noticed, being a silly old thing." Dougal thought of asking Dillon, but it was unlikely that Dillon would have noticed anything. "Wake up." Yes. Yeah, yes." "Jam," said Dougal. "Seen any?" said Florence. Ma'am, you will forgive me if I don't, follow you, He wouldn't know a pot of jam if it hit him on the head. Come on." Dougal walked on, then stopped suddenly. "Now who's this?" "Mr. McHenry," said Florence, and it was. Dougal asked him if he had seen any jam or a snail or both, but Mr. McHenry said he hadn't. But then he hadn't been looking too closely either. "I tend to overlook snails." "You're lucky," said Dougal. "Now don't worry," said Florence. "It'll turn up eventually." And eventually, to the sound of a tooting train, they saw Brian approaching, laden down with jam. Dougal controlled himself with difficulty. "Look what I've found," said Brian. "Oh dear," thought Florence. "It was just lying there, and I found it. Dougal had a quick count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. "Come here, you." "I'm a jam finder," said Brian. Dougal retained an icy calm. "All's well that ends well," said Florence. "It's my jam." "Oh, I didn't know that, old jam owner," said Brian. "Your talent is only exceeded by your personal beauty." And Brian laughed as he went into his shell. Penelope is lazy. Dougal was in a state. "I'm in a state." "May one ask why?" said Brian. And Dougal explained that Florence had knitted him a coat and he'd lost it. "It'll look so ungrateful not to have it on." Say it's in the wash." "I suppose we are going to be treated to a lot of stupid suggestions. I'll trouble you to try and be constructive, if possible." "I am constructive." "No, you're not. You're about as constructive as an atom bomb. And you look a bit like one too." Meanwhile, Florence waited. "Waiting for me?" said Zebedee. "Am I late?" "Hey, not at all," said Florence. "Oh, anyway, only a little." Florence called to Dougal. "Hello," said Dougal. "Isn't it a lovely day?" "Yes, lovely. Much too hot to have anything extra on." "Like a kilt," said Brian. "What did you say, Brian?" said Florence. "Nothing," he said. "Nothing. Don't listen to him." "No, I didn't say anything." "Yes, you did," said Florence. "Did I? Well, I can't remember," said Brian. "I'll pulverize that snail before I'm through. Anyone want a flower?" "I don't think I said anything," said Brian. "Now, what is going on?" said Florence. Nothing. You wait till I get you home." Brian retreated into his shell. "Where's your kilt?" he said in a muffled voice. "Oh, that mollusk." "I don't think I said anything," said Brian, laughing. Florence was bewildered. "He's dotty. Touch of the sun," said Dougal. "The Dougals are coming, hurrah, hurrah." "What did I tell you? Quite dotty." "I wish I knew what was going on," said Florence. "Knitted any good kilts lately?" They came across a strange scene. A train caught in a spider's web, not something you see every day. "Now, get out, you great monster," said Penelope, the spider. What? What? I recognize that." It was a piece of his kilt. "Who's responsible for this? Heads will roll. The claymores will be brandished, madam. I require an answer. Did you unpick my kilt, yes or no?" "Yes, I did." "Then I'll trouble you to re-knit it." "But it's got a train in it, and knitting is difficult enough without having a train sitting on your needles, if you know what I mean." "It's very naughty of you," said Florence. "Naughty? It was the act of a vandal. Look at me black watch tartan like the Battle of Bannockburn, which we won incidentally." "Bravo, Dougal," said Florence. "I'm exhausted," said Penelope. "Well, get this train out anyway," said Dougal. Penelope decided to make amends by giving Florence a bow for her hair. "Thank you," said Florence. "That's all very well, but what about my kilt? It's hung up here like spaghetti, and it's got a train on it." "Cut it," said Brian. So Penelope did. "I'm glad that's over," said the train. Zebedee arrived. "All well, because it's time for bed." "Good night," said Florence. Dougal looked at his kilt. "They'll never believe me in Dundee." Voyage d'affaires. Mr. Rusty told Florence that he'd been thinking. That's a long time since I went on holiday. Were you thinking of going now, then?" "Yes, I can't think where to go, that's all." "We'll ask Zebedee. He's good at holidays." "I heard that," said Zebedee. "Go and see Dougal. He's best at holidays." "You know," said Mr. Rusty, "I am not too sure about the wisdom of this. Look, hello, Dougal," said Florence. "Welcome to the Dougal Travel Service. Holidays arranged, satisfaction guaranteed." "Brian helping," said Florence. "I certainly am. I work out the best way to go with my map and my powerful brain. Wolverhampton." "Wolverhampton," said Florence. "Lovely place." I'm not sure that's where I want to go," said Mr. Rusty. "I can see we're going to have difficulty with this client," said Brian. "He doesn't want to go to Wolverhampton. That poses a problem." "I don't want to be difficult." "They all say that." And Dougal explained that everything had been prepared for the Wolverhampton tour. The special luggage was all ready, for instance. "And the tropical kit," said Brian. It gets very hot in Wolverhampton, especially if you keep your vest on. Well, I don't want to be difficult, but I don't want to go. How about Stoke-on-Trent? Said Brian. How about abroad? Said Florence. Abroad? Ooh, that's tricky. You don't want to go abroad, said Dougal. All those foreigners milling about as though they owned the place. Really, Dougal, said Florence. Well, what's wrong with Britain? I could offer you the Grand Canal, Manchester, the Doge's Palace, Dundee, or the Leaning Tower of West Ham, said Brian. But Florence and Mr. Rusty weren't interested. We'll have to think of something else, said Brian. Florence apologised for being difficult. That's all right, said Dougal. We really wanted to go somewhere exotic. More exotic than Wolverhampton, said Dougal. Brian fetched more travel books while they prepared for an exotic holiday. What about China? Said Florence. Brian and Dougal went quite pale. China, said Florence. China, said Mr. Rusty. The very place, said Florence. But Brian and Dougal weren't too sure. Can you arrange it at once? Said Florence and Mr. Rusty. Quite sure you wouldn't prefer the hanging gardens of Leeds? Said Dougal slowly. And Mr. Rusty and Florence said they were absolutely positive. China or nothing. Dougal consulted Brian. How do we get them to China? Bicycle? That is a soppy suggestion. It would take hours. And anyway, what are they going to say in Wolverhampton? Not at home to snails. Zebedee brought Florence a letter from Dougal. From Dougal? From Dougal. So Florence read the letter. Dear Florence, I have installed a bell at my front door. If you wish to call on me, will you please give 3 short rings and 1 long ring? Tell Zebedee that if he calls, he should give 3 long rings and 1 short ring. Yours, Dougal. I'll never remember, said Zebedee. It's a bit complicated, isn't it? Said Florence. But they decided to go and see. Unfortunately, on the way, Florence lost the instructions about Dougal's bell, and she couldn't remember whether to knock or ring. Oh, dear! Dougal, meanwhile, was at home, quiet and peaceful. Hello, Dougal, old matey, said Brian. Did you ring? No, I said hello to... I heard you, but I didn't hear you ring. Ting-a-ling-a-ling? Dougal decided that he'd better show Brian the bell, so he did. Can I have a go? Said Brian. No, you may not have a go. If you want to see me, you will ring the bell once. Understand? Once. What will happen then? I shall say, come in. Oh, what happens if you're not in? Then I won't say anything, will I? Well, no, you couldn't say anything if you weren't in. Dougal gave Brian a withering look and withdrew, leaving Brian alone with the bell. The bell rang. I shall do that snail an injury one day. I won't answer. Brian rang again. Funny, Dougal said if I rang once, he'd say, come in. I'll try again. He must be in because I saw him go in. What a funny fellow. Hello, Brian, said Florence. Going to see Dougal? Yes. He's not in. How do you know? I rang the bell. Look. I shall keep my temper, said Dougal. That snail can ring all day. I am not into snails. Brian and Florence wondered where Dougal could be. He can't be in, said Florence. No, he can't be. Shall we, ring the bell a lot? What a good idea. So they played a duet on the bell, which made Dougal wish he wasn't in. I shall go mad. Meanwhile, back at the bell, Zebedee wanted to know what was going on, so Brian and Florence told him about Dougal and the bell, and Dougal not being in and everything. So Zebedee decided to try the bell too. 3 long rings and 1 short ring. "Come in, come in, come in, come in." So they all came in. "Did you ring?" "Zebedee did," said Brian. "I heard him." "We thought you were out," said Florence. "Yes, we thought you were out." "But you're in," said Florence. "In bed," said Zebedee. All work and no play. Zebedee asked Florence what she was going to do, and Florence told him she was going to the garden, and she was going to make a necklace with some beads she had in her bag. "Dougal will help me." "Are you sure?" said Zebedee. "He doesn't like work." "It's not work, it's pleasure." "Dougal won't think so." But Florence waited for Dougal, determined he would help her. "I'll ask him nicely," she thought. "Good morning, Dougal. You're just in time." "In time for what?" "To help me with my work." "Work?" "You'll enjoy it." "That'll be the day. I've just remembered. I've got to see a dog about a man." And he escaped. What an escape! Work? Me? Then he met Brian. "Just in time, Comrade Dougal." "What can you mean?" "To help me water my lettuces." "You're a funny little thing." "So I've been told." "I'd like to help, little mollusk, but we dogs have to conserve our strength, you know." "Oh, I know." And Dougal escaped again. "Everybody's working," thought Dougal, amazed. And then he met Mr. McHenry. "Excuse me, you're not working, are you?" "No, I'm playing." "Really? How sensible." "I'm playing at blowing up tires." Dougal thought about it. "Can I have a go?" "Certainly," said Mr. McHenry. "You blow and blow until the tire is quite hard. It's fun." "Is it?" "Oh, yes, but you mustn't stop. If you stop, it spoils the fun." And he left, laughing for some reason. "Mustn't stop," mumbled Dougal. "Mustn't spoil the fun. This is better than working." Florence wondered how Dougal was getting on. "How's Dougal getting on?" she asked, and Mr. McHenry told her. "I must go and see." "What fun!" said Dougal, panting rather hard. "Dougal, you are working hard." "I'm not working, I'm playing." And Florence had a little giggle. "Want to have a go?" said Dougal. "I don't think so, thank you." "Is Dougal working?" said Zebedee. "Yes," said Florence. "He's helping Mr. McHenry blow up his tire." "How kind." "I've been tricked," thought Dougal. "But remember, Dougal," said Florence, "that all play and no work makes Dougal a dull dog." "Well said," said Zebedee. "Bed." The Nutcrackers. Florence told Zebedee she was going to pick some nuts in the garden. "And Dougal says he will lend me his nutcrackers." "You'd better go then, hadn't you?" said Zebedee. "Where are they?" "What you lost, Dougal, old haggis?" said Brian. "My nutcrackers." "Going to crack some nuts?" "Oh, no, I'm going fishing." "With nutcrackers?" "Give me strength." "Did you know you got a mackerel on your head?" said Brian, innocently. "I hope Dougal brings the nutcrackers soon," thought Florence. And she asked Mr. McHenry if he liked nuts, and Mr. McHenry said he doted on nuts, and Florence said he should have one when Dougal came with the nutcrackers. "Dougal, I'll get my nutcrackers," said Mr. McHenry, and he went, leaving Florence nutting happily. Dougal hadn't been able to find his nutcrackers, so he and Brian thought they would make some. "Can't be difficult." "Have a go," said Brian. Meanwhile, lucky for Florence, Mr. McHenry had found his nutcrackers, and they worked very well. "Don't they look good?" said Florence. And she offered one to Mr. McHenry, but Mr. McHenry was too interested in his nutcrackers to eat nuts. So Florence said she would go and find Dougal and his nutcrackers. "Goodbye, then," said Mr. McHenry. Dougal and Brian hadn't much success with making nutcrackers. "I'm a bit discouraged." "I can imagine," said Brian. "They should be easy to make. Perhaps we should go to night school, back to the drawing board. You can get into day school." "Dougal," said Florence, arriving, "you're wounded." "Oh, it's nothing, nothing." "Brian, you too?" "Yes, and it hurts like anything." "What have you been up to?" "Nutcrackers," said Dougal. "Yes, nutcrackers. We tried to make some." "Yes." "But Mr. McHenry cracked the nuts for me with his machine," said Florence. "That makes me feel much better." So Florence gave them both some nuts to make them feel better. "Don't eat nuts in bed," said Zebedee. Brian, cushion killer. Florence found Zebedee having a little sleep, which was unusual, and she told him she was going to see Dougal, which wasn't unusual. "I'm going to give him that cushion for his bed." "I can testify to its comfort," said Zebedee. "Oh, good," said Florence. So Florence looked for Dougal to give him the cushion. "He's still in bed, I expect." But Florence was wrong. Dougal was humming as he made his bed. "Hello, Dougal." "Ah, he gave me quite a ton." When Dougal recovered, Florence gave him his cushion. "Oh, you shouldn't have. How can I? Oh, it's just what I wanted. I'm glad you like it." "Can I try it?" "But you've only just got up. I think you should take a run first." "Run? Run? I'm not a greyhound, you know. I can see that." And they both walked out into the garden. Brian was looking for Dougal, and he found the cushion. "What have we here? A scattered cushion? Oh, dropped perhaps from some passing carriage. What's this? Feathers? Can some poor feathered friend be trapped in there? Hello, inside. Don't worry, Brian is here." Brian muttered and hummed as he emptied the cushion. "It must be awful in there. It must be very small." Meanwhile, in another part of the garden, Dougal had decided he'd had enough exercise for one day. "Shall we wander back?" "So you can sit on your cushion, I suppose," said Florence. "I might." Brian had decided that the feathers had been lost by some bird. Must be a bit cold by now. Just then Dougal and Florence arrived. "Have you seen a very cold bird?" said Brian. "My cushion. What, you cushion killer." "Oh dear," said Florence. "I thought a bird had lost its feathers." "No, it was Dougal's feather cushion." I've made a slight error then." "I wish I had a cushion stuffed with snails. I'm sure Brian did it for the best." "Someone molting," said Zebedee. So Florence told him all about it. "I notice that snail has sneaked off," said Dougal. So Zebedee decided, as he often did, to do a little magic for the sake of peace. "I can't thank you enough," said Dougal, sitting down on his re-feathered cushion. "Feather cushions are so sympathetic." "Sleep well, Dougal," said Florence. "Sleep soft, Florence," said Zebedee. The Smoking Volcano. Florence told Zebedee she was wondering how Dougal and Brian were getting on. "Go and see," said Zebedee. "Yes, I will," said Florence. And Zebedee made sure she arrived safely. Brian and Dougal were having a chat about smoking. "It's a disgusting habit," said Dougal, coughing. "It'll stunt your growth. Got a cough, Dougal, old son? Why don't you smoke indoors? I am indoors. And Dougal got so angry he took the pipe away from Brian, and quite right too. Well, if you're going to be like that, said Brian, and he left. Now I've hurt his feelings, I suppose. Really, some people. And he went to find Florence. But out in the garden he found a volcano instead. Whatever next, a baby mountain, smoking? It can't be, I must be seeing things, it can't be. But it was, and Dougal got just a little bit frightened. Help! Florence was wondering where Dougal could be, when he rushed in a state of great agitation. Women and children and dogs first. Whatever's the matter, Dougal? Make for the hills. Why? So Dougal told her about the volcano and how he was sure it was about to erupt. How do you know? It's smoking. Smoking? Smoking. Just then Mr. McHenry came along and Florence told him about the volcano. And it's smoking, hissed Dougal. Volcano? Said Mr. McHenry. Where? Dougal will show you, said Florence. No, I won't. But Mr. McHenry still went to see the volcano. Yes, volcano all right. Stay here, won't be long. Stay here? Said Dougal. He must be mad. I will not allow myself to be covered in red-hot ashes. But Mr. McHenry came back with a fire extinguisher, and he went to the volcano and extinguished it. All's done, fire's out. Goodbye. So Florence went to have a look, followed rather nervously by Dougal. That's a volcano, said Florence. Looks more like a cream cake. Appearances can be deceptive. And just then a very strange thing began to happen. It's erupting, said Dougal. But it wasn't erupting. It was Brian coming out. Good evening, all. Brian, said Florence, what are you doing in that volcano? It's not a volcano, it's where I go to smoke my pipe in peace. Ha, said Dougal. I hope your tobacco got wet. And Florence had a laugh at the thought of Brian being put out by Mr. McHenry. What's been going on, then? Said Zebedee. You'll never believe it, said Florence, so I won't tell you.